So now it's time to hear our story about Easter.
Jesus was heading back to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him quietly. When they arrived, the disciples sat down, and Jesus said to them, "Pray now, pray that you won't be tested." Jesus walked away and fell to his knees, praying to God. When he finished, he came back to the disciples, only to find them fast asleep. He said, "Why are you not praying? Wake up and pray that you won't be tested." A crowd came over, and Judas was leading. He came over and kissed Jesus on the cheek, but there was a strange look on his face. Then the disciples realized it had been Judas all along. They grabbed their swords and asked Jesus, "Shall we attack them? Shall we use our swords?" "No, stop it, it's okay." But it was too late. Someone had swung their sword and cut a man's ear off. Jesus simply reached out and touched a man's ear, and it was healed immediately. The guards arrested Jesus and took him away. They took him to a governor named Pilate, who was to decide Jesus' fate. He asked Jesus a lot of questions. One of the main ones was, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "Well, that's what you say." After a few questions more, Pilate came to a conclusion. He said, "I believe this man has done nothing wrong at all," and he didn't want to do anything more than whipping him.
But the crowd shouted, "Kill him, kill him. Let someone else go free instead. That Barabbas guy, that murderer, if you want to let someone get away with what they've done, he'll do." Barabbas was a murderer and he'd been in jail serving his time. It was a tradition that the governor would set one prisoner free around the Passover every year if he wanted. Pilate couldn't quite believe what he was hearing, so he told the crowd again that Jesus had done nothing wrong. Kill him, put him on a cross, crucify him." "But why? He hasn't done anything wrong. I've told you, I'll get him whipped and beaten up. Surely that's enough," said Pilate. He was getting pretty desperate now, but the shouting didn't stop. In fact, it got worse and worse. The crowds were truly scary, and even Pilate gave in. He let Barabbas get out of jail and gave Jesus to the crowd. "Do what you want with him," he said as he walked away. The soldiers dragged Jesus away. On their way out of the city, they saw a man called Simon coming in from the field, and they grabbed him and made him carry the cross. Lots of people were still following Jesus even now. Many of the women were crying, and Jesus turned round to face them. "Don't cry because of me. You should cry for yourselves and your children. There are terrible things coming, much worse than you can imagine. In those days you'll wish you weren't here. If these things are happening to me now, then when I'm here with you, imagine what will happen when I'm not." There were 2 more men being crucified that day, and when they reached the place outside the city called the Skull, the soldiers fastened the men to the crosses and lined them up, side by side with Jesus in the middle. As Jesus hung there on his cross, he said, "Father God, please, please forgive these people. They don't know what they're doing." The soldiers were standing around waiting for the end, and they were arguing about who would get to keep Jesus' clothes. They were rolling dice to see who would be the winner. The leaders who had wanted Jesus dead were standing around and were still shouting things at Jesus. "Look at him, he said he saved people. He can't even save himself, can he? If he's God Messiah, that shouldn't be too hard." The soldiers shouted things at Jesus too. They even brought him some wine. "If you're the king of the Jews," they said, "come on down, save yourself." There was a sign above Jesus' head that said, "This is the King of the Jews." Even one of the other men being crucified shouted at Jesus, "You're supposed to be the Messiah, aren't you? Do some saving then. Save yourself and save me." "Hey," shouted the other man, "aren't you afraid of God? You're on a cross because of all the awful things you did. We deserve to be here. It's our own fault. But this man, Jesus, He never did anything wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus said, I tell you the truth. I promise that even today you will be with me in paradise. At around 12 o'clock, everything went dark. The sky was black. The sun had stopped shining. Everything stayed dark until the middle of the afternoon, when suddenly the curtain in the temple tore in two, and Jesus shouted, Father, into your hands I place my spirit. And then he died.